The desert did not rush to kill her. It never did. It waited. Dusk settled across the high plain like a held breath, the sun bleeding out behind distant mesas. Heat still clung to the stones, trapped there by a long, merciless day. Wind threaded through the mesquite, dry and whispering, carrying the smell of dust and old iron. She fell where the land gave no mercy, knees first, then hands, then the rest of her. Blood soaked into sand that had already tasted too much of it. Her breath came thin and shallow, each one borrowed, each one uncertain. The earth did not soften beneath her. The sky did not answer. Here, life was not taken violently. It was simply allowed to run out. The rancher found her near the western fence line, where the land dipped and the stones gathered like old bones. His horse slowed before he asked it to, ears twitching, sensing something wrong in the quiet. At first, she looked like debris, another shape abandoned by the desert. Then he saw the dark stain beneath her, the uneven rise of her chest. He dismounted slowly. Years ago, he had promised himself he would never kneel beside another broken body. Not again. Not after the last time had cost him everything worth keeping. He knew what she was the moment he saw her dress, the marks of travel, the way the land itself seemed tense around her. Helping her would not be kindness. It would be declaration. The tribes remembered. The settlers remembered. The land remembered best of all. Blood called for blood, and mercy was often mistaken for insult. He stood there longer than he should have, hat pulled low, eyes fixed on the horizon as if it might give him permission to turn away. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with memory. A woman's laugh, long buried. A child's small hand slipping from his own. He exhaled, slow and bitter. "I ain't doin' this again," he muttered, more prayer than promise. But the desert offered no absolution. Only silence. And in that silence, conscience spoke louder than it had in years. He knelt beside her. Lifting her felt heavier than it should have. Not in body, but in consequence. The rancher shifted her weight carefully, mindful of the wound, mindful of how close he stood to a line he could never step back across. Her head lolled against his shoulder, breath faint and uneven. The horse stamped once, uneasy, then stilled as if it understood the gravity of what was being asked of it. They rode slowly. Every creak of the saddle sounded too loud in the open country. Every step forward felt like a nail driven into the past he had tried to bury. He did not look behind him. He did not want to see how far he had already gone. The cabin emerged from the land as it always had, gray, weathered, stubborn. He carried her inside, laid her near the hearth, and stepped back. The door closed with a sound that settled deep in his chest. It was not shelter he had offered. It was declaration. She woke as if pulled from deep water, breath sharp, body coiled to strike. Her eyes found him instantly, measuring, counting, searching for threat. Pain flared as she moved, but she did not cry out. He stayed where he was. The rifle rested against the wall, untouched. His hands were empty. He pushed a tin cup of water across the floor with his boot, slow enough that she could see every motion. She drank only after he turned away. Food followed. Plain. Unseasoned. The kind meant to sustain, not impress. He cleaned the wound without ceremony, fingers steady, pressure firm but careful. No ropes. No questions. No names. She watched him through every breath, waiting for the moment kindness revealed its price. It never did. Trust did not arrive as belief. It arrived as the absence of harm. Night settled gently, the kind that does not fall but eases its way into the world. Firelight stretched long shadows across the cabin walls, turning rough wood into something almost alive. She began to hum as the flames softened, low and steady, a sound shaped by memory rather than melody. It was not meant for him, yet it filled the space between them. Grief lived in the notes, but so did endurance, carried forward by breath alone. Before sleep claimed her, she left something near the hearth, a small carved symbol, worn smooth by years of handling. He noticed it at dawn. He did not ask. Instead, he repaired an old keepsake of his own, setting it upright where the morning light could touch it. Two histories acknowledged each other without explanation. Some things were too old for words. The first sign came with the morning. Boot prints cut through the soft earth near the creek, sharp-edged and recent. They had not been there the day before. The rancher crouched, fingers hovering just above them, as if touch alone might summon whoever had made them. He said nothing when she came to stand beside him. He did not need to. Her eyes followed the tracks, then lifted toward the ridge. Later, they saw the rider. A lone figure, distant and still, framed against the pale sky. Watching. Waiting. The land itself seemed to tighten beneath the gaze, as though it recognized what was coming. The ranch was no longer invisible. Whatever piece they had borrowed had begun to fracture, thin as glass beneath a rising weight. They spoke that night with the fire pulled low, as if even flame might listen. Outside, the desert settled into its long, breathing quiet, the kind that carries memory more faithfully than sound. He went first. He spoke of a woman who laughed easily, even when the world gave her little reason to. Of a small house once filled with noise, now returned to dust. He told her how gunfire had come without warning, how the screams ended too quickly, how the ground had felt cold when he knelt beside them afterward. He did not raise his voice. He did not weep. Grief, for him, had hardened into something like stone. When he finished, the fire cracked softly. She waited, then answered in her own time. A family scattered by betrayal. A home torn apart not only by enemies, but by fear turned inward. She spoke of running when running felt like treason, of surviving when survival felt like theft. Their pain did not compete. It recognized itself. In the firelight, they were no longer rescuer and rescued. They were equals, each carrying absence like a second shadow. Morning came pale and cool, the kind that made the desert seem almost forgiving. She rose before him, moving carefully, favoring the wound but refusing to be slowed by it. By the time he stepped outside, she was already at work, gathering kindling, testing the fence where the wire sagged. He told her she did not need to do that. She looked at him then, steady, unflinching, and shook her head. The words, when they came, were simple and final. I stay. Not as gratitude. Not as shelter sought. As decision. From that day forward, the ranch took on a different rhythm. Two sets of tracks crossed the yard at dawn. Two shadows stretched long across the ground at sunset. She stood watch when night fell, eyes sharp, presence sure. She was no longer something hidden behind closed doors. She had chosen her ground. They came at midday. Not hidden now. Not quiet. Riders moved with deliberate care, faces painted, eyes sharp, horses slow and steady. Dust rose in lazy clouds beneath their hooves, floating across the sunlit plain like a warning. The rancher counted them silently, shoulders tense but posture unbroken. She stood beside him, shoulders squared, breath steady, hands resting lightly on the tool she carried, not in readiness to strike, but in assertion of presence. This was no accident. No misstep of wandering eyes or wandering feet. The world had noticed. And what had been a fragile piece would not survive its gaze. The demand would be spoken aloud. Custom. Blood memory. Expectation. The waiting, heavier than confrontation, pressed on both of them. They formed a half-circle before the cabin, horses planted solidly in the dust, reins loose but hands resting where weapons could be drawn. The eldest among them spoke, voice calm, carrying the weight of tradition and expectation. "She is ours," he said. "Shelter has broken balance. Blood must answer, or union restore it." The rancher stepped forward, boots firm against the baked earth. He did not raise his voice. He did not reach for his rifle. Only eyes, steady, unwavering, met theirs. "She stays," he said. "Not as threat. Not as challenge. As truth." The wind stirred, carrying a hawk's solitary cry across the plain. Dust swirled, bending to the tension of the moment. Violence hovered, close enough to taste. Yet restraint, dignity, principle, they held the line stronger than anger ever could. The young among them shifted uneasily. The elders said nothing. The desert itself seemed to lean in, holding its breath for what would come next. She watched him, understanding the quiet courage that demanded as much from her as it did from him. The standoff was not merely between men. It was a reckoning with choice, honor, and the right to remain unclaimed. Before another word could be spoken, she moved. She stepped forward, fully upright, placing herself beside him. Her eyes met the eyes of the elders, steady, unwavering. Her voice, when it came, was clear across the dusty yard. "I choose," she said. Not defiance. Not surrender. A declaration. She spoke of survival earned, of loss endured, of the right to claim where her spirit might rest. Every motion, every measured step, carried certainty. The young ones whispered to one another, uncertain. The elders nodded slowly, the weight of tradition bending, but not breaking, in recognition of her resolve. Belonging, once taken from her, was now claimed, not granted. For a long moment, the desert seemed to exhale. Wind swept the dust into tiny whirlwinds, carrying the faint scent of mesquite and earth. She stood her ground. She stood her choice. Seasons passed, slow and deliberate. The ranch endured, weathered yet whole. Two figures moved through its routines with quiet certainty, the rhythm of labor and care marking time as the desert itself watched. Silence, once heavy with fear and uncertainty, became a companion earned. Graves were tended. Fences repaired. Crops gathered. Water drawn from the creek with steady hands. Laughter returned, rare, cautious, but unmistakably real. What had begun as shelter became home. What had threatened bloodshed had yielded understanding. In the vast, patient quiet of the land, forgiveness took root. Choices made in desperation had grown into belonging, and the legacy was not mere survival, but a life lived with dignity, compassion, and deliberate care.